because of Mother Nature and something called the Great Scam. The Great Scam was the day that the male of the species convinced the female of the species that it no longer needed to prove itself worthy in order to reproduce and have babies, but the fact that the men are ugly says otherwise, right? They're not supposed to exist. They're supposed to be cannon fodder to the strong, attractive men who are worthy of having babies. So while y'all are out here being like the men don't take care of themselves, that's why they're unattractive. No, you're fucking a 10,000-year-old genetic anomaly. He's not supposed to exist, babe. Like there's no amount of moisturizer and sunscreen that will change the fact that his great 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 grandma should have fucking swallowed him. Like we are out here fucking and making babies like we're a goddamn endangered species, but the breeding stock is foul. And that's why most men are ugly. Okay? They DEI'd themselves into someone's grandma's coochie. And now we are all forced to deal with the consequences of that.
So usually, I don't like to talk about people's looks on this channel. But when you bring science into it, then I've got to get my 2 cents into it. We understand breeding stock. We're all part of the breeding stock, right? It's not just separate male, female. When you have babies, it's a combination of both, right? It's genetic recombination, and it's supposed to be 50-50, but depends on, maybe it's 49-51, whatever, right? You get genes from both parents. So when you complain about the stock, you're part of the stock. You're part of the problem. Just because you want to make it, again, we get what this is. It's become in vogue simply to criticize men in whatever fashion, from whatever position you occupy. When you were saying that there's this genetic basis for why men don't look as good as women, and they somehow convinced women that, hey, you should still breed with me. One, consider yourself the fool then, if that's the case. You didn't get scammed, you're just fooled, right? If we're going with that type of train of thought, which again, I think is absolutely stupid. It's the problem I have with this is when you pretend you understand science, when you use certain terms to justify what you're saying so it sounds good, but it's really just based in more misandry. You don't think men look good. That's fine to say. Fine. We understand what happens when men say, you don't look good either. When they say your whole thing, you're not great breeding stock either. We understand what happens when those words come out of man's mouth in mass. There's something wrong with men. Men must be stopped. Men must be fixed. And then there's a litany of articles and essays and treatises that come out about what's wrong with men. At some point in time, someone's going to have to pull the plug on this and say, yeah, you can't really talk like that because you're not perched to talk like that. Because women don't look at each other and say, you're ugly, you're really pretty. You don't rank yourselves in that sort of sense. Somehow it's okay to rank men in those terms. But listen, we're going to do a deeper dive into this. But first, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss no uploads. Still trying to do 2 a day, still trying to pay that rent. And you can see I'm a little heated about this video. But I think whenever, like I've said before, whenever you see stuff like this, you have to give the counter narrative. You have to try to inject some sort of sense without, of course, without dragging someone. I'm sure there'll be plenty of other people that have fun with that, and I'll leave it to them because I'm always a reminder that my mom and my aunt watch this channel, so I don't want a 3-hour conversation how I could have been or should have been nicer to someone. Putting that aside, I don't think it advances the argument. I think when we don't pay attention to what we put out there and we get, like, the comment section is always an echo chamber of people saying the same things, and then they take that when they go offline, they take that internalized and they move throughout the world like that. If you want to call men, if you want to judge anyone by any other metric, the first thing you need to look at is judge yourself first by that same metric. Are you qualified to say this? Does this advance any type of argument? Is this helpful? When you get a no to any of these, it's probably just best to say, this is not a good place for me to actually sit and judge. But what we see more often than not is that it becomes, like I said, it's in vogue. It's okay to do. No one sits there and criticizes when you complain or you criticize men. As long as the men are the subject matter, then all is fine. All is permissible. Let's play this again so we can break it down further.
Sucks. Most men are deeply unattractive because of Mother Nature and something called the Great Scam. The Great Scam was the day that the male of the species convinced the female of the species that it no longer needed to prove itself worthy in order to reproduce and have babies, but the fact that the men are ugly says otherwise.
So if we want to look at the Great Scam in theoretically, because of what she's talking about, but just in terms of evolutionary sense, at some point in time, it stopped being about who is the strongest, who has the most resources, or who is the leader of said tribe. When we civilized life, when we created walled cities, when we started actually herding animals and breeding animals, life became easier. You no longer had to be the fastest, strongest, maybe the more cunning. You know, their other attributes had a chance to now blossom and thrive. And so when you're looking at Neanderthals, sure, the biggest, the fastest, the most clever, and then you breed along those lines. I'll give you a simple example. How we all seem to have an innate fear of heights. And the theory is that the ones that played closer to the cliff that did not have a fear of it simply went off the cliff. Those that did and respected the cliff and said, that's bad, that's dangerous, they stayed far away from it. They got to reproduce as no one else was left, passing down that sort of learned behavior, that learned fear. Same thing with what goes bump in the night. Those that had no fear went out and explored, didn't come back. Those that learned to fear the dark said, oh, I should be better here. Learn, and they pass those genetics on. In a sense, once you civilize, once you civilize a people, you no longer have to road around in your base sort of desires. That's no longer most important. Do you think the one that accumulates the most wealth is the fittest? We see enough of that, how that happens today, right? It just echoes down in time. Now we start to select for security, but in a different sense than sort of just, musculature. Who has the biggest stick? Who has the biggest unga bunga? No, it's now what resources can you amass that can then buy me the security I need. So again, I'm only going this hard because I hate when people try to interject science and they're absolutely completely foolish on that take.
Right? They're not supposed to exist. They're supposed to be cannon fodder to the strong, attractive men who are worthy of having babies.
Okay, in that same sort of like, and again, I know I'm going a little more in than I usually do, but again, it's in the name of defending science. When you want to look at something in terms of what would not exist, you should be thankful that we civilized society, that it's no longer who is the fastest or the strongest, because then you would breed out for basically obesity. Outside of carrying extra weight because of weather related purposes, if a predator or a neighboring group attacked and you had to flee, those that could not flee because they ate too much or overate, they had more fat, they could not move, they would die out. So it's on one hand, let's cut the foolishness and think that it's just an attractiveness thing is bred out. You want more attractive people, then yeah, sure. You should address how we breed with each other, but that's not the type of society we have. And even if we did, we all know the real truth. You're not unattractive. You're just poor. You're just poor. We can go under the knife to do whatever you need to do to become attractive, as long as you have the money. So it's not really that much of detriment. And if men turned around and said the same thing, well, you have no excuse why you're that size or that ugly. You can get surgery. You know how that looks. You know how that looks. I still, to this day, I don't understand how the open misandry is just like, it's fine. All you get is people saying clock it, right? Which again, when grown women do that, I hate it. Absolutely hate it. Listen, if you think I'm off base, you think I missed something, you think my argument evolved from nothingness, let me know down in the comments below. I'm always open to the discourse. If you see other videos on your screen, take a look at those. Let me know what you think about those and those videos as well. And of course, if you listen to sound my voice now, appreciate you. Thanks for sticking around. You know, we're just trying to pay the rent. Um, you should throw a subscription, join the train. I'll see you in the next one.